Hello everybody and welcome to tonight's webinar Flexible Milking Regime. I'm John Tobin, the Systems Manager for LIC Ireland. I will be the facilitator for the evening. Tonight's webinar is a result of the interest we've been getting here on the ground regarding alternative milking frequencies, whether it's to reduce the workload of early calving or to be used in late lactation when milk yield is dropping. There's no doubt a shortage of labour out there on farms, so alternative milking frequencies might have a role to play in that scenario, and some farmers will use it to make their place more attractive or to keep the staff they have. In New Zealand, only 40% of farmers now milk twice a day all season long, so it's no surprise that LIC has a wealth of information on the topic and can have the answers to any of the questions you may have. So for tonight, the format is we have two presenters who I will introduce to you shortly. They will speak for about 20 minutes each, and then it will be followed by a questions and answers session. We have enabled our Ask a Question feature, so if you have any questions, just pop them in there and they will be answered at the end. If you miss anything, don't worry. We are recording this session and it will be made available over the next few days. So our two presenters have plenty of experience. The first presenter is Bred, and he's better known as Pvc. He will cover off the first session, different milking frequencies. Pvc likes to challenge the current thinking and exploring new ways of doing things. Pvc Dairy Farmer. He is now a dairy farm consultant for the last 17 years. He lives and works on the west coast in the South Island of New Zealand. Education-wise, his background, he has a postgraduate diploma in agricultural science in a Massey University, a Bachelor of Agricultural Commerce from Lincoln University. He's accredited body condition score assessor, qualified sustainable nutrition management certification, and finally his finest moment was in 2016 when he won the Farmax Dairy NZ Farm Consultant of the Year award. Our second presenter to follow will be Steve Davis. He will cover off what happens to the other under once a day scenarios. He is one of LIC's senior scientists and he's been working in the area since the early 90s. He has written papers such as Lactation traits associated with short and long-term once-a-day milking performance in New Zealand crossbred dairy cattle. He also wrote Mammary Growth During Pregnancy and Lactation and its relationship with milk yield. So he's definitely his qualifications to cover that subject. Education-wise, he has a Bachelor of Science and a Master's of Science and a PhD in Science from the University of Nottingham. And finally, contrary to popular opinion, he does not play snooker. That's the info on the two bios. I will now hand you over to Brent, who will start the first session.
Okay, so milking frequency in New Zealand, the history and the mystery. It's been quite a journey over many years as to what has happened to our industry, really. The biggest issue we have, I guess it's like many countries around the world now, is the people and how we can actually make things better for people. So milking frequency, we have things typically here in New Zealand, twice a day, once a day, 3 and 2, and now 10 and 7, etc. I'm a fan of all the frequencies, and it's all about choices on your farm. And I guess what's come to light over the last couple of years particularly is, can we do the same or better with less effort? Less than 40% of people in New Zealand now milk twice a day all year. And that is I guess it's a big part of why we're trying to change and improve things even further. How can we get the best out of our cows and out of our people, and can we do more production, the same, for less effort? So from the start, twice a day, sometimes once a day, and really 16 hours was common in New Zealand. In November 2001, we had a very, very wet November, and I started 14, 16, 18 hours, which was in Murchison, which is an inland sort of colder climate. 5 a.m, 9 p.m, and 1 p.m. Was the old how we used to do it, and we decided to change it. And we brought those hours down. Rather than actually stick to the traditional 16 hours, we actually made that 5 a.m, 7 p.m, and 11 a.m, and it was much more sociable and better for the people. Now, when he got to about 3 or 4 years after that, we got to the stage where we realised we could manipulate the hours a lot more, and everyone had their own little version of it. So I renamed it the milking system of 14, 16, 8, and I renamed it to call it 3 and 2 milking. And so from about 2007, I presented a paper on 3 and 2 milking at the International Once a Day Conference in Hamilton. And from 2007 to about 2016-17, there was a steady uptake of 3 and 2, both in New Zealand and overseas. There was quite a large group in Tasmania and in Australia generally. But at that stage, I got an award from the dairy industry, and as part of it, my thinking was to rewrite the papers on 3 and 2 milking. And I represented those, and we got quite a large intake. It stimulated a lot more thinking. And at that stage, Dairy NZ realised that 3 and 2 wasn't going to go away, and they decided it was quite good to actually get some funding to do some research. And that's been ongoing now, I think, since about 2019. And they got about $850,000 worth of funding to actually look at the first lot of flexible milking. Now, in February 2018, I had a light bulb moment. My fellow presenter, Steve Davis, he came and spoke to us at one of our conferences. And one of his thinkings was that, from his presentation, that really stuck with me, is that there was a belief from the information he could gather that if we milked twice a day, just twice a week, we could get similar production to where we were if we milked twice a day all week. And that really set things going to me, and I realised that I'd been missing some opportunities, and I really need to apologise to the world's dairy industry. I should have seen this years ago. This is what I'm meant to be good at, and I didn't get it. So apologise to anyone who's been doing these different milking frequencies sort of 4 or 5 years ago, 3 and 2, and some of the more inflexible stuff. Now we've got some flexibility. So in spring 2019, I sat down and worked out all the gaps between our 3 regimes and made some new ones. And since then, it's spread like wildfire. There's been a steady uptake of changes and options right through our industry. So the thinking around milking frequency, the traditional milking frequency of being, like decades ago, everyone was twice a day, and we thought everyone was a sheep. If you're a once a day, this is 20 years ago, you were considered lazy hippies, and if you're on 16-hour milking, you were confused and or in trouble. And in the dairy society, we're a 7-day-a-week business and a weekend-based society. So how can we as an industry become more weekend-centric? Can we better look after our people, the animals in business? Can we improve Dairy Works' image as a career? Now, if we can reduce the drudgery on a daily basis, can we improve mental well-being? And that has been a focus for, I guess, since I first started on this journey in 2001. We help the cows, we've also got to help ourselves, because there's a lot of work. It's been quite tremendous these last 2 years, the amount of emails, messages, etc. I'm getting from all around the world, from farmers who are saying, I'm under a lot of stress. One particular one was from Wales about 6 months ago, and the chap said, I'm 30 years old, I've got 3 little children, I've seen them for 3 hours in this last week, and this to me is an important part of what we're trying to aim towards. Now we know once a day is a great option. What other options are there? And I know 3 and 2 can be a muddle. I'm the architect of 3 and 2, I built the thing, and I don't do a lot of it now. And how can we get from our high producing herds twice a day production with less milkings? Here are our current thinking on milking frequency. You got twice a day, and if we break it down to milkings in 7 days, this is the key. Twice a day, we do 14 milkings in 7 days. 3 and 2 is 10.5 milkings in 7 days, and once a day, of course, is 7 milkings in 7 days. The daily grind of twice a day milking has been standard. And so here's what our future could consist of. You know, we've got 14 and 7, 3 and 2, once a day. So it's possible in those gaps in between. These are the things, the gaps in between. What's possible? 13 and 7, 12 and 7, 11 and 7, 10 milkings in 7 days. We've got an opportunity now to fill these gaps with real flexibility, and these things are happening. It's been interesting to follow the journey that Lincoln University, the dairy farm there, is on. They're actually doing 10 and 7 all season. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out for the year. From what they're going to do there, can the people in production and profitability fit better with what we want to do? Can we as an industry at last become weekend-centric? So here's what it stacks up like. If you're going to look at it, it looks pretty messy. How can we be weekend-centric? There's all your different things. Twice a day, 13 and 7, 12 milkings in 7 days, 3 and 2. Now, the milking times are just purely indicative at 5 a.m. and 3 p.m. I just chose that so it'd look quite tidy across the board. And I've picked 10 a.m. as a time that you may do your other milkings. So if you go along the bottom there, that's the number of milkings a week. You got 14, dropping down to 10, 9, 7, etc. Note that 5 a.m. and 3 p.m. for this stuff over here, if we get to something like 10 and 7, it's 5 a.m. This could be 5 a.m. as well. I've got a few guys doing this. At the moment, we've got quite a wet spring where I am here at the moment, and I've got guys who are doing a Tuesday and Friday. They're keeping everything at 5 a.m. They're just dropping out a 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, a 3 p.m. on a Friday, and a 3 p.m. on a Sunday to do 11 milkings in 7 days. So the big driver at the moment that we're seeing around New Zealand and overseas is 10 milkings in 7 days. And if you look at the comparison between it, 10 milkings versus 3 and 2, it's only half a milking a week we're missing. But the key here is that Saturday and Sundays, it's just once a day. Whereas my old friend 3 and 2, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast. It's 5:30, 10 a.m, and in the weekends it changes around all the time. Here, on 10 and 7, 10 a.m. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Thursday, 10 a.m. Saturday, and 8 a.m. Sunday. What we're trying to do with these splits is to get equidistance between the milking, so it's not just a 24-hour split here. But however, with that, I do have, like I said in the last slide, have people who are saying, okay, I like to milk at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning all the time. They'll keep those morning milkings the same. They will lose a little bit more production, but they're happy with that. If you're trying to do it pretty much right, that would be 5 a.m, 10 a.m, 3 p.m. sort of stuff. I have guys doing 6 a.m, 4 p.m, 10 a.m, 11 a.m. You can change it and rearrange it to suit your system and your business. So 10 and 7, twice a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, once a day, Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays, and again on Sunday, usually a little bit earlier, so it's not a true 24-hour break. This avoids that weekend mess on 3 and 2. 10 and 7 is great for Tuesdays and Thursdays, your evening sports practices. That's typically what we have here in New Zealand. And 10 and 7 is awesome if you've got young people and they want to get out on a Friday and Saturday night. They're milking at 10 a.m. and 8 a.m. So can you do the same milking frequency all season? You can adjust the hours wider during peak lactation or the hot summer, like if in the hot peak, in the cooler areas you might do 5 a.m, 3 p.m. and 10 a.m. sort of peak. But in the heat of the summer we get to 30 degrees here or more, even up to 40. And in the summer we have guys that do 5 a.m, 7 p.m, etc. and 8 a.m. You can change it and rearrange it and make it work for your business. You can start on one regime and change to the other. You can match milk harvest with the lactation peak in your spring feed. You can feed the cows two different ways. Some people feed their cows on a 48-hour basis where they say, okay, normally I'll feed them X amount in 24 and 48 hours. They'll break that up into 3 milkings and they won't worry too much about how many hours. But other people will say, I've got a 12, 18, 18 split, so on that 12-hour milking I'll give them less feed and do more on the 18, 18. That doesn't really matter. Work it how you do it. If you've got 3 paddocks you can feed in 48 hours, just do it like that. The hours can be flexible. They can be splits like 12, 18, 18, 10, 19, 19, etc. The work that Paul Edwards from Dairy NZ is doing is worth having a look at if you really want to get into the bones of it. there is not a lot of significant, it's not statistically significant, the hours in between. What's more important is the number of times you milk per week. The frequency is more critical than the hours, and that's the rescue that I think Steve's going to talk about. Now, we can produce the same as twice a day with less milkings, and flexible milking does suit those high-producing herds. So what's a good mixed milking regime? If you were going to say, okay, I want to do it perfectly, what's a good mix? You could start the season on once a day for up to 3 weeks, and there's very little production loss. You could then go twice a day until end of AI or just before Christmas. You can do 10 and 7 from Christmas until mid-April, and then do once a day to the end. I call this logistically lazy feeding. If you've got a 50 paddock farm, you feed out 1 paddock per milking from balance date. So for us, that'll be mid-September until the end of the season. So you might be on 50 paddocks, 20 to 25 days on twice a day. You probably have some paddocks out for crops or for some silage. If you get to Christmas time, you just keep going to 1 paddock per milking. It's a 33-day around on 10 and 7. And if you're on once a day for those last month and a half in April, it's 50 days to the end. And you can get the same production as twice a day. I have a lot of farmers who do this, and there's way less effort. And have a look at this next table. You're going to save 5 days of your life each year. Now this looks a pretty busy table. It's milkings per period. I'm just trying to get this table out of the way. Twice a day all season. I'd like to come over to this third column, and that is twice a day, then once a day, and at the end it's once a day all season. So on this column here, you can do twice a day until Christmas time, then once a day to the end. You'll only do 446 milkings. You'll save 17 days of your life. But unfortunately, you're only going to do 95% of the production you did on twice a day. Now for us here in New Zealand, we'll start, say in my area, we'll start on the 1st of August and we'll go to the end of May. It's a total of 304 days. And if you're on twice a day, it's 608 milkings. If you go twice a day till Christmas time and then once a day, that's 446 milkings. The milkings will take a bit longer with that time on once a day. You save yourself 162 milkings and 17 days of your life. And of course, if you're on once a day, unfortunately, you're only going to do typically 90% of what you would have done on twice a day. You've only done 304 milkings. The milkings do take a bit longer. You've saved 32 days of your life. Now, you sort of want your cake and eat it too. It's this red column here, where you might start on once a day, twice a day, 10 and 7, or even 3 and 2, then once a day. So you go once a day, say for 3 weeks, twice a day to just before Christmas, 10 and 7 from there, say till middle of April, and those last 45 days on once a day. I can guarantee if you do this, I've done it so many times for the last nearly 20 years now, that you'll be on doing similar production to twice a day. So that's 475 milkings. On average, it takes a little bit longer, production-wise, but you've saved 15 days of your life. That's quite incredible. 352 hours you've saved. And that shed, you've done 133 less milkings to do the same production. So, should you do 10 and 7, say, all season or part of your season? Yes. Make the logistics and practicalities work on each farm. Adopt it, then adapt it. When should you go 10 and 7 for no losses? Like 3 and 2, it's best after 4 to 5 months of lactation. There's minimal losses. Somatic cell count, no problem. Great for people. You can do 10 and 7 right from the start. There are some downsides to 10 and 7. I do note that if you've got a herd that has a history with staph and the somatics and the mastitis, stay on 3 and 2 or twice a day. That 10 and 7, the Saturday and Sunday milking, seems to get staph going in your herd if you've got a history of it. Can you go from once a day to 10 and 7 or 9 and 7? If you're a once a day person, you can put your cows from once a day on 10 and 7 or even 9 and 7 in October, December to lift those peaks closer to twice a day. I've got a couple of farmers doing this year. Similar response in late lactation. 3 afternoon milkings will work to better match that spring feed and milk production. production and efficiency of milking frequency. Good farmers will achieve great productivity and profitability on however they do their farming milking. I've got nearly 1,500 comparative lactation curves that show production is typically the same or better on mixed milking frequency versus all season twice a day. You're better capturing that peak milk curve when you say start once a day, twice a day, 10 and 7, etc., than if you tried to go twice a day, once a day in big lumps. The question I ask is, why waste all that energy on twice a day in mid to late lactation? We can actually do it with less harvest. Now, the important thing is, for this, if you do the milking frequency like we've just talked about, cow condition is usually better. Mating is often better. And we tend to find that cows become better. It sort of becomes cumulative with increased cow wellness and increased people wellness too. You can put non-cycling cows on once a day over AI, then back to twice a day. I do a lot of that. We call it low intervention mating. That's a very important thing to do. Mating results of these at-risk cows, often you have cows that are not cycling at the start of AI. This particular mob that's on once a day over AI, they often have better mating results than the main herd on twice a day. And at the end of AI, they can go back to twice a day. Lameness, this is a good one, is usually better. Animal health is better. We get more lactations, our cows last longer. And the farm assets last longer. You know, the sheds use less, the lanes are used less, the bikes you use less, and you yourself are used less. So here's a great case study. You know, you want to look at high production herds. Here's one in Dunsandel in Canterbury, just out of Christchurch, and these people are on twice a day. There's the last 4 seasons. They were on twice a day till January. They had their lights on once a day from January, and all the cows once a day in May. They did 275,000 milk solids, 461 milk solids a cow. Great effort. Jump along to the next row. Twice a day till Christmas time, 3 and 2 to the 7th of May, then once a day to the end. They jumped 30,000 milk solids. More cows, but they also did 480 milk solids a cow. Interesting down here, the number of milkings a year dropped from 537 to 516. So the next season, they did twice a day till just after Christmas, 10 and 7 till middle of April, then 9 and 7 to the end. Will blow me down if they didn't jump up to 317,000 milk solids and did 516 a cow. They did 464 milkings. Now this last year, just gone, they didn't do twice a day at all. They did 3 and 2 till Christmas Day, and they did 10 and 7 to the end of May. They were slightly down in production. They did 312,000 milk solids, 509 a cow, and 441 milkings. That was a stellar effort. The next farm is Jason and Beth Macbeth. They're in Golden Bay in the top of the South Island where I'm from. They've changed to a different farm after the end of those 3 years, but they did twice a day till Christmas, 3 and 2, then once a day, 419 a cow, 466 milkings. The next year they went from twice a day to 3 and 2 to once a day, increased the cow production 457, less milkings. And their last year at Bajance, and it's not an easy farm. They've got a road crossing they have to hold the cows back at. They've got some poor irrigation systems. They did twice a day till the start of AI. Then they did 10 and 7 until just before Christmas. Then they did once a day to the end. They did 474 milk solids a cow and only 404 milkings. Now they've now shifted to a very tough farm in Golden Bay. And they did once a day to start. They did twice a day for a couple of months in 10 and 7. Their per cow production, they've increased cow numbers, etc. But they're still able to do 411 a cow in one of the toughest environments. The average in that region there is 350 a cow. And they only did 393 milkings, where their neighbour does less production and did 606 milkings. So there's some efficiencies there that can be done. So the profitability of different milking frequencies, I won't go on about this much, but I'll leave this here as something you may want to have a look at. Farmers who have reduced milking frequencies generally have less costs and similar or better production. But we need more farmers on the New Zealand dairy base for significant profit analysis. We need better ways to break up data sets, and how do we compare twice a day with what happens? It may be that we do 500 less milkings or less. Do we compare those to twice a day? There's great information coming out from the Dairy NZ trials, especially profit information. Now here's a profit comparison we did for the berries and Macbeths. This may be something to look at. It could be profit of milking, profit of milk solid times milk solid per milking. It could be something like that. This is just put up there as something to perhaps get people thinking. Have a look at it yourself. Perhaps look at your own business as to whether that would be something you would look at benchmarking against. This is purely my thinking, so it's yet to be tested in a great way, but I want to get the conversation going because we need to find a way of doing some comparisons. Now, other thoughts on milking frequency. I always have other thoughts. To make a start, you could try 13 and 7, then 12 and 7. You could do once a day at 1 day a week at, say, 10 a.m. for, say, Christmas Day. You could drop a milking off a month. It could be a week. If it doesn't work for you, here's the key. You haven't broken anything. You can go back to twice a day. You can use one milking regime all season. You can use several milking regimes in a season. You might start once a day, twice a day, 10 and 7, once a day, etc. We do have a lot of people who just prefer one milking regime all season. Do what works for you on your farm. Get the logistics and feeding right. Enjoy the weekend. Spend time with the family. Spend time on yourself. With the change, and we talk about climate change and etc., the milking frequency, it may be a better match for weather issues. Like you could change milking frequency more with the climate if it's too wet and cold or hot and dry. Adjust your time frames. Adjust the time numbers of milkings you do a week. And most important, and I keep coming back to this, milking frequency can be a real boost for mental well-being. So in summary, I'm now doing the first trials for once a day and dropping to just 6 milkings in 7 days. The cows are so flexible. Can we be too? If you dream up something and you're not sure, email me. I'll tell you whether it's possible or not. We've done some pretty wild and radical things. If you do it, you need to get the logistics right. Make it a practical and repeatable farm system. Now, there's tremendous interest both here and internationally for 10 and 7, etc., and changing these milking frequencies. Everyone's very hungry for it. We're only limited by our imagination. Please look after yourselves, your people, your animals, and your business. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Brent. That was brilliant. That was plenty of food for thought there, and I'm sure it will lead to plenty of questions at the end. Without any further ado, Steve Davis, you're up next with your presentation.
Right, hello everybody. I'm just going to talk to you about quite a different sort of talk than the one that Brent has just given. But I'm coming really at this and trying to provide you with information as to what the constraints and limitations are to production when you reduce milking frequency. So basically, how does milking frequency regulate milk production? So why do farmers want to reduce milking frequency? Well, in New Zealand and also in the UK, it's largely for reasons of either lifestyle, labour shortages, cow fertility. There's an improvement in cow fertility when milking frequency is reduced. And there's some animal welfare issues, particularly in New Zealand, where you don't want to be dragging cows up on a long walk in the heat of the afternoon for the afternoon milking. In Ireland, there's an extra issue that there's a need to limit peak milk production. The volume of peak production potentially is getting close to meeting the processing capability is not going to meet peak production. So we need to limit peak production a little bit, which can be achieved by reducing milking frequency and causing a level of production loss in order to match supply to processing ability. So what I'm going to talk about really is to some extent what I give to students in New Zealand about what regulates milk production. And for me, it's all about the udder and how the udder behaves in response to milk removal. And one way of looking at dairy farming is it's about growing the biggest udders you possibly can during pregnancies, and then when lactation starts, you want to maintain them and maintain the cells in them that produce the milk for at least 9 or 10 months, so maximise production on that basis. Now, one thing I've just realised in the last few years is that many people don't realise that udders really only grow during pregnancy. There's a massive increase in the number of cells that produce milk in pregnancy, but once lactation is established, there's really no evidence that there's any further growth in the gland at all. There might be a little bit in the first few days, but later, certainly that everything is downhill. Once lactation is established, if you lose cells for whatever reason, whether it could be reduced milking frequency, it could be underfeeding, it could be mastitis, you won't get those cells back until the following lactation, when they're replaced during the dry period in the following pregnancy. So it really is a case of use it or lose it, and by that I mean you've got to keep those cells functioning and look after the cells if you want to maintain milk production, high milk production throughout lactation. As I was saying, that the cells are lost, and this is some of the evidence for it, using a very crude proxy measure for the size of the udder or the number of cells in the udder. Here, this is some old data from Jersey cows in New Zealand, and you'll see that udder growth as measured by udder volume, empty udder volume, no milk in the udder at all. You'll see that volume declines over at least the first 25 weeks of calving as volume, and it actually the number of cells continues to decline. It's just that udder volume is a fairly imprecise measure particularly in late lactation. So, yeah, you lose cells as lactation progresses. And the other components that are of particular interest to us are, one is the amount of secretory tissue, which is this area at the top, and this is where the alveoli that make milk are situated, and there's literally billions of these things in a lactating udder. But there's also a sort of storage compartment beneath the alveoli, which is a sort of honeycomb arrangement where all the ducts and channels that drain the milk out to the teat really all come together in that lower part of the udder. And in case you think this is a very strange looking udder, it is actually a goat udder, but it was probably the clearest picture I could find of cisterns and secretory tissue. But those two features of the udder are key to how the udder performs, particularly with reduced milking frequency. And as milk accumulates in the udder through time after milking, then a couple of things happen. First of all, just looking at this top line here, this is total milk accumulating in the udder with time from a zero base. And up to about 16 hours, you'll see that's pretty linear. It's just starting to curve away a little bit at 16 hours, so the rate of production is declining, and then rate declines a little bit further after 16 hours to 24 hours, and then somewhere probably around about 26 hours the udder is full and no more milk accumulates in the udder after that time. So really udder capacity is around about 26 hours worth of milk secretion. It varies a little bit between the breeds of cattle. If you're an American Holstein, they're particularly good at secreting water, and those udders are full after about 20 to 22 hours post milking, whereas a Jersey cow can go to 28 to 30 hours after milking before it's actually full. But if you look how the milk distributes between the compartments, then the alveolar compartment is full pretty much at 16 hours. So that's the secretory tissue has become distended with milk, and then the overflow from the alveoli starts to accumulate in the cistern. So really over the last 8 hours of a 24-hour period, we're pouring milk out of the alveoli into the cisterns, and that's being replaced to a degree. But the overall rate of secretion is slowing. So the alveoli I mentioned before are pictured diagrammatically here. So we've got this, basically an alveolus is a ball of cells, and the simplest way to explain it is that the alveoli connected a bit like a bunch of grapes, and the alveoli, being an alveolus is one grape. It contains about 300 secreting cells, which take take nutrients from the blood and transform it into milk and secrete it into the middle of the grape, if you like. And around, just as an aside, around the outside of the alveolus, we've got little muscle cells which contract under the influence of milk letdown hormones, and that will then force the milk out of the alveolus down to the teat. Now the key thing is that these secreting cells here change shape as milk accumulates in the gland, and they don't like changing shape from a production point of view. So immediately after milking, the cells are very columnar, very long. This is about, to give you some idea of scale here, that's about 1/100 of a millimetre in distance. And then after 24 hours of milk accumulation, the cells are flattened and much reduced in the way of rates of secretion. And there's lots of data now to show that the signal really that starts to switch cells off from secreting is associated with that change in cell shape as milk accumulates. So it's really a mechanism that slows secretion down as the udder becomes more and more distended, which is really quite useful in stopping over distension, if you like, of the udder. So filling the alveoli, to give you an idea of the time frame here, we've got an empty alveolus portrayed as a saggy balloon, and then after about 8 hours that's sort of half full, but really after 12 to 16 hours our cells are flattened, our alveolus is fully distended, and things are starting to happen in response to that distension. And looking at the pattern of yield loss under when you switch from twice a day to once daily milking, then we've got two groups of cows here, one on once a day and one on twice a day. And over the first 12 hours, the others don't know they're not going to be milked in the once a day group at 12 hours, so they're secreting pretty much at the same rate as the twice a day group. But as I showed you in that graph, then the rate of secretion really starts to fall away after about 16 hours of milk accumulation, and we're starting to see that here, whereas there's actually a slight increase in the twice daily group. But then when you milk them after 24 hours, you'd think, well, perhaps the cells would recover fully, but they don't. They're still locked into being the stress, if you like, of having that period of milk accumulation over the last 8 hours of that previous 24-hour period. So we've got still got a slow rate of secretion, and that reduces still further after 48 hours. So we've really take 2 days before the animals are equilibrating to that new milking regime. So that's one element, is that we're looking at really a limitation to production of around, once you get past 16 hours, a 16-hour milking interval, then you can expect to start losing milk production. It might only be a few percent if it's up to an 18-hour interval, but obviously when you get out to once a day, it can be as high as 20%. But there's something else going on in the background there as well, that we lose more udder tissue with once daily milking. So we accelerate the rate of loss during lactation. And I showed you before that we'll get loss anyway during lactation. Stick animals under once a day and you'll accelerate that loss. And this is just some data from comparing Jerseys and Friesian cows milked twice a day over a 12-week period, pretty much in mid-lactation in New Zealand, about 25 years ago now. And these are arbitrary units, but an udder at peak lactation would have an arbitrary unit of about 15 in terms of overall size. So over 12 weeks, our twice daily Friesian is losing about 20% of its total. But put them on once a day and you double that rate of loss. Jersey cows on twice a day, a somewhat lower rate of tissue loss. Put them on once a day, and we again more than double that rate of tissue loss. So there's once we lose that tissue, we lose the ability to produce milk, or lose the potential milk production from the gland. So just to emphasise that point, we're losing production with once daily milking really because of two things. One, because the alveoli are full for a longer period of time, they become stretched, and they either slow production in the cells in the gland or they switch off entirely. And secondly, because those cells are dying at a faster rate, and that is linked to them being switched off, which I'll come back to in a minute. And really, it's when you think about it, when you put animals onto once a day or reduce milking frequency, you just move them along a path a little bit closer to what they would experience at drying off. So at milking, we've got the gland going at full speed, as it were. After 16 hours, our production is slowing. At 30 hours, our production stops. And I'll come to this in a minute, but after a week or so, those cells that have stopped producing will die off. But up until about 7 days, you can recover full milk production. So another one for Boise to try is to try milking just once a week is one option, which is probably not a good move, but it is certainly possible to get a full recovery of milk production after 7 days of cows not being milked. But after that time, more and more cells die, and by 28 to 30 days post milking, the gland has dried off. So just to show you what's going on in early lactation, which with some Irish data from McNamara et al. In 2008, and I've got 2 or 3 lots of information here. Looking at once daily milking in very early lactation, we've got 2 things going on. We've got a big production drop, which is of the order of around about 8 to 10 litres a day in this case, for the 4 weeks at which these animals are on once a day. Put them back onto twice a day, the milk production increases, but it never gets back to what the twice a day group was producing. Starts to get closer and closer as lactation progresses, but there is this carryover effect, which is associated with that loss of tissue I was talking about, that progressively diminishes with time, but is certainly a big contribution to the overall production loss associated with once daily milking. Now, what we don't know at this stage is what Boise was talking about in early lactation. If you put these animals on 10 and 7, would we still see the same carryover effects? And I would argue, because we put them back on twice a day for 2 or 3 times, you probably wouldn't see anything like the same sort of carryover. So there's one example of what happens, and certainly I think the mammary tissue is much more sensitive to production loss in early lactation than it would be out here in say after mid lactation, and that's possibly associated with the size of the alveoli, but we've got no data to support that. So we need to get some more data around that in early lactation. And similarly, just to show some Uruguayan data, which is a bit strange after 24 weeks, but certainly very similar to that first Irish paper, that we, on once a day, massively different production compared to twice a day. And this is in Heifers, and they were, I think, Friesian crossbred Heifers in Uruguay. Put them back onto twice a day after 8 weeks, and they increase production quite dramatically, but never really get back to what the twice a day group were producing. But then after about 24 weeks, rather than the once a day group now being milked twice a day, rather than catching up to the twice a day group, it's the twice a day group that comes down to meet the once a day group. But again, a considerable period of carryover in that in those animals. And we've obtained similar data in New Zealand that Jane Kay and Claire Finn at Dairy NZ have done similar work and shown similar carryover effects. But just to spoil the party a little bit, Emma Kennedy at Chuggas just published recently showing very little carryover of the early lactation production loss from up to 8 weeks of once daily milking at the start of lactation. So that's something which I think is interesting from the point of view that we obviously means that we don't understand fully what's going on with once a day in early lactation. But there's some other principles that can be invoked that mean that there is no carryover, but we just don't know what those are. The production loss in this case was about 21% on once a day. So I think four or five experiments show that carryover production loss and probably associated with the loss of tissue. But this one experiment begs the question as to really what's going on. So can we do anything to reduce that carryover loss? Emma Kennedy obviously can, but I think there's nothing defined in the paper as to what was different. But I think there is certainly an opportunity to reduce that production loss, and this is just to illustrate how long it takes for cells to die once they've been on an extended period of not being milked. In this case, we've got 3 groups of animals not milked for 2 days, 4 days, or 7 days. Put them back onto normal twice a day milking, and it takes a little while, takes about 8 or 9 days, but the production level, particularly in the 7-day group, will get back up to what the other 2 groups are producing. And there's a control group I've left out of this, but that's pretty much what the control group was giving as well. So we can fully recover lactation, i.e. we're fully restoring functionality in the mammary cells up to about a week after milking. So how does that relate to what Brent was talking about? Well, if we're looking at milking times of 10 and 7, you can argue that what is happening here, that with first of all, this system was limiting the milking interval to around about 16 to 18 hours, depending on which day of the week it is. But so that's limiting the production loss down to a few percent as opposed to double figures losses. But what we're doing by milking on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays twice a day, or with relatively short intervals, is to rescue lactation in those cells that are in those alveoli that are being switched off. So we're preventing the premature death of those cells in that lactation. And this is what we need data for now, is as to how appropriate this sort of approach is in early lactation in order to minimize production loss. But obviously the longer the interval and the less frequent the milking in early lactation, the more the production loss is going to be. Now, if it was me milking in early lactation, I think I would opt for a system more like this, where you'd perhaps just have a couple of rescue challenges in early lactation and try and retain cells that way, but then milk once a day for maybe 4 days of the lot. But as Brett pointed out, there's any which way of milking strategies that can be invoked. 10 in 7 is one. This one makes it 9 in 7. You can go more or less depending on what your own wishes are for your own farm management. So, just to summarise, what causes production loss with reduced milking frequency? Well, first of all, milk-secreting cells reduce their rate of production. Secondly, some milk-secreting cells stop production altogether, and if you don't rescue those cells with increased milking frequency, they will die, and you won't see them again until, or get them replaced until the following lactation. And they're not really replaced until that next pregnancy. So that's that's what I was going to say about the milking frequency, or the biology of milking frequency. just to add one extra thing in about milking frequency and looking at what other mammals do, well, there's something like 4,500 different species of mammals. And not unsurprisingly, some of them do milk once a day or even less. And there's one key feature around them is really that if you want to extend milking intervals, milk composition is important. And those species like humans and cows who nurse their young relatively frequently in a natural sense, particularly dairy cows, then they produce a relatively dilute milk compared to species that have more extended milking intervals. So rabbits will nurse their young just once every 24 hours. They've got something like 12% protein in their milk and very high fat. So less volume, more contained nutrients. They can feed the young just once every 24 hours, and the young is getting a good nutrient supply. Seals are the masters of extended milking intervals. They've got protein at 10 to 15%, fat at 40 to 50%, and they'll nurse their young every 4 to 10 days and go fishing in between time. So really very high nutrient dense milk secretion, and that enables them to provide lots of nutrients for their young at less frequent intervals. So lower volume, higher solids is better. We've got plenty of data, I think, now that says that Jersey cows are optimum or best for milk secretion on once a day. Personally, but I've seen people talk about and swear by putting Friesians on once a day. But lower the volume is better, particularly from putting less stress on the udder and in terms of its carrying capacity for a full 24 hours worth of milk production. And it's better from point of view of there's less stretching of the alveoli, so less shutdown of milk secretion. And that is your so the message really is think about what type of animal you want to milk, and think about the loss of production and trying to rescue those cells so they don't die too early in lactation. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve, for the presentation. Very interesting once again. We'll waste no time and we'll move straight over to the question and answer session. So, hi everyone, welcome to the question and answer session. Our panel for the question and answer session consists of our two presenters, Brent Bryce and Steve Davis, and they will be joined by Dr. Emer Kennedy, who is over the once a day trials in Thaugus Moor Park here in Ireland. She will also explain to us about the new trials she's doing in Moor Park next year. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. Also, we have Martin and Anya Ryan, who are dairy farming outside Cashel in County Tipperary here in Ireland as well. Tonight, very much a partnership between Martin and Anya, but Martin will be the face of the business for tonight. They're operating unusual. They have two farms. On one farm, they're 3 and 2. On the second farm, they were once a day. Up until recently, that was, and now both farms are once a day as we come to the end of their lactation. And finally, then the second farmer we have on tonight is Mark Hoskins, who decided to go 3 and 2 when his herd manager left earlier in the year. He's milking 420 cows in the UK, and I'm sure he'll expand on that later on. So thanks for all for showing up, and great to have you all on board. So without further delay, we're going to just start through the questions. Okay, so the first question, this will be at you, Steve. So can we breed to reduce cell loss within the udder without changing the cow breed?
As I mentioned in the talk, then really the breed, choosing the breed that you use in the first place is probably the best option. There's a little bit of the persistency of lactation does have a heritable trait. But it's a relatively, I think the heritability for memory is relatively low. And as I say, part of a selection index, it would take a long time to make change. The best sort of cows that are the ones that will have a good letdown. You can get rid of all the milk from the udder, and those are probably the more persistent ones. So that the answer, there's a messy answer, but if the answer is yes, but it would take a long time, and you're probably better off going with a crossbred or a Jersey as an immediate response.
Right, thanks, Steve. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, and this one's for you, Bicey. So, is a 6-week dry period too short even for a well-conditioned cow?
I don't think so. I don't know where that question comes from. 6-week dry period. I don't think so. Most of our guys here would have 8 weeks. It's pretty standard where I am anyway. So, Steve, that may be something for you to answer. 6 weeks dry period.
No, most of what I've read about that was work that was done in the 1940s and 50s, but it's mostly around American data that basically said if you go less than 6 weeks, you'll get a production loss in the following lactation. So I don't believe there's any data that says that that should be any different in a modern cow, but I'm not aware of any experiments on that.
Okay, fair enough. Martin, I'm going to just direct this question at you, and I suppose before you answer it, if you just give us a brief outline on what the last 6 months has been like for you since, I think it was last July, you went 3 and 2 on one farm and once a day on the other farm. But the question is, do you find that some cows do not make the switch to 3 and 2 like to do to move into once a day? And I think you had the experience of both, so.
On the 3 and 2, most cows, to be fair, seem to take to that fairly well. It's not really that different to twice a day, really. On the once a day, definitely, there's cows that just seem to put loads of condition on their back and start to reduce yield fairly quick. So, on the 3 and 2, no.
No. So you have some cows not making the switch to once a day, but 3 and 2 milkings are doing okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you just want to take us through why you went 3 and 2 on your farm this year? On one farm you did 3 and 2, on the other farm you did once a day. The reasons for that?
I suppose labour was probably the main reason. Why did we? Sorry, we went once a day on one of the farms. We've kind of a long walk, and we got quite dry during the summer, and we were kind of walking that long distance a bit more just to make use of more land. So I suppose we went once a day for that reason, and also we have to cross the road on that farm. On the 3 and 2, it just, I suppose, reduced labour, but it wasn't going to reduce yield. Was kind of the hope, and it seems to have worked fairly well from that point of view.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's good. Moving on to the next question. For you, Bicey, moving the cows to 16, 18-hour milkings, to 16 and 18-hour milkings and movements, does this create more damage to the swart in wet conditions? So
talking to the pasture?
Yeah, pasture.
More damage to the pasture? I don't think so. Considering your stock movements are going down from 4 times in 2 days to 3 times in 2 days, a lot less damage. It allows you to slow the round down if you're allocating paddocks at a certain time. John, I'm not actually sure what the question is.
So
what is it?
I suppose the question is, say if a guy is allocating 12-hour allocations of pasture, you go in, you clean, you deck it, you clean it, and you come out. I suppose this guy is probably, if he's doing for 18 hours, he's assuming he's going to have a heavier buffer to go into it. Yeah,
you allocate a greater area.
Yeah, so it's a greater area, not a greater cover.
Those 4 feeds in 48 hours are now spread out into 3 feeds. So you get a greater area in that period. So you allocate 3 feeds instead of 4 on 3 and 2. Would that be fair, Martin and Mark? Is that what you do?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. It took a bit to get used to, a couple of weeks, I guess, for pasture allocation, when we're used to 12-hour breaks, to switch it around. But something to get used to.
Steve, this question is for you. Can cows be bred to not need as much of a rescue period?
That's sort of similar to that other question, really. I'd probably say yes, particularly if you get a handle on the ability of cows to let down, but there'd be real difficulty in getting the measurements that you want in order to breed for them, I think. So at the moment, particularly in New Zealand, then we're relying on the breeding for performance on twice a day milking to generate good animals. It's very highly with their performance on once a day, and going to that breeding for rescue ability is probably just too hard. But it's a good question, but I've never really thought that hard about it. But it's the one thing I will say is that the cows that have a poor letdown will have relatively short lactations and relatively poor persistency of lactation. We had a bunch of Jerseys once that refused to let down on a regular basis. They do it probably 3 times a week, and they would have calved in August and be dry by Christmas. So that milking and making sure that you're removing as much milk as possible when the milking frequency is extended it becomes more important as you reduce milking frequency.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to direct this at you, Mark and Martin. What happened to milk production when you went from twice a day to 3 and 2? Mark, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so we started 3 and 2 1st of September. The cows were milking very good. Before that, in August, actually, we were doing 18 litres. The first day, the first couple of days into 3 and 2, we didn't drop an awful lot, actually. I expected more, about 0.8 of a litre. Milk solids dropped from 1.59 to 1.55 a cow. So not a lot at all, but it was probably 2 to 3 weeks in the 3 and 2, sort of the middle of September. We took a much bigger hit. We're obviously on the decline anyway, but I did sort of wonder what we'd done. We dropped a further sort of couple of litres over the space of probably 4 or 5 days. But after that, we sort of plateaued, and then we've held steady ever since.
Okay, and just Mark, what are you doing now in say I know it's November, say towards the end of October this year compared to last year? How were you looking production wise? Yeah,
so September, like I said, we took a fair hit. I've worked out that we lost 10% of our litres from September to the September 20, and total milk solids we lost 7%. Although solids were up, milk solids, the fat and protein were up a total of the month 3%. But back into October, we've lost very little. We've lost a total of 2.5% of our litres and 2% of our total milk solids when you compare to the last October. So we've lost very little. Yeah, and probably those costs are easily recuperated through better body condition score at the back end and less milking, seems to me. Definitely.
Yeah, Martin, what's your experience? Milk production going from twice a day to 3 and 2 or once a day, what was the drop like?
Yeah, so when we went 3 and 2, we very little of any dropped. We were doing about 1.7 or just a little over when we went 3 and 2, and we kind of stayed at that for most of the time. We started dropping, I suppose, kind of the end of September, and up until kind of the last week of October, we're doing about 1.5. And then on the other herd, when we went once a day we were going from about 1.6, and we dropped about 0.2 when we went once a day. But they've instead dropping a bit quicker since then, on the once a day side of things. But the other side of that, we were very tight for grass all during the summer, and we ended up feeding a silage and different things, so that didn't help.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Basically, you're not in there. Does that sound familiar to what you see in New Zealand when you're going from twice a day to 3 or 2 or once a day?
Yeah, if you yes, that is what I would see here, particularly if you're having issues with feed or dry summer. So Martin, yeah, that is what you'd see. If feed situations are good, often you don't see as big a drop. It just depends on the season. If you're going to 3 and 2 or once a day because you've got a seasonal challenge, yeah, you'll see a bigger drop. And you'd have something similar to that if you're on twice a day, not as much in the vat in regards to milk production, but if you've stayed on twice a day, you'd see a bigger impact on cow condition, etc. And that could be an issue for the following season. So there'd be an impact no matter what you do.
And Emer, do you want to comment on what you've seen in your trials in Moore Park?
In terms of reduction with once a day?
Yeah.
So we haven't really done any of the flexible milking, we'll say, yet. That's more for planned for next spring. With any of the reductions in once a day, generally it's somewhere between 20 to 25% reduction in milk and milk solids. Even it's like that's if it's full-time once a day, if it's once a day for the start in the spring, or if it's late lactation, so for the last 7 weeks. It's actually a little bit higher during that period of once a day. In late lactation, say at this time, we have found maybe a 25% reduction in milk production in late lactation.
Yeah, so that's going from twice a day to once a day in late lactation. You're saying 25% in solids, not volume.
Both.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's the next one. I suppose, Mark, you've covered it already, but quickly, just the reason for, or it was mentioned earlier, the reason for changing from twice a day to 3 and 2.
Yeah, we had a change of staff there in the summer. I've been looking at this for maybe a year now. Just some articles I've seen, a bit of research there, and it looked all positive. To get the same or similar production from less effort. I'm keen to have a go at certain things, and it's not like buying an expensive machine. With doing this, you can soon change back. You can change back tomorrow if it's no good for you. So I thought, let's have a go, and we just haven't looked back. It's been real positive, great for the staff and myself as well. Yeah.
So at you, Martin, what hours are you milking, Martin? So because you're fitting a 3 and 2 and once a day, you're juggling the 2. What hours are you milking?
So we started off on the 3 and 2. We started off at about kind of 5:30 in the morning, 4 in the evening, and we were going 10 the following day. And I suppose as we kind of got more comfortable with it, we changed the hours a bit. So we stayed 5:30. We brought the evening milking back to 3, and the following morning we started at 8:30. So it just meant that we weren't in the middle of the day finishing up milking. It didn't seem to have much of an effect on production that I could see anyway. And then the once a day is early in the morning as well.
They're sociable enough, because you're starting at 3, so I'm assuming you're finished around 5:30, 6. And then the next morning, you get your lie in, but you're probably still wrapped up at 11:30 to go on and do jobs for the day. You don't have to come back or decide to get off farm and chill for a while. I suppose this one to you, Bicey. How do heifers cope with reduced milking frequency, and would it be appropriate to milk them twice a day for the first lactation?
That's a very interesting question. When we go to once a day, quite often we have herds here in New Zealand where we've got logistic issues and we split the herd into a once a day herd and a twice a day herd. Often it's the young cows on once a day doing the far walkings. And we will find, instead of doing about 70 to 75% of the herd average, when they're on once a day, they only do about 60 to 65% of the herd average. So yes, they do drop production. I think from the research that I've read over the years, that if a heifer is milked once a day in her first lactation, there is no issues with future lactations. Would I milk her twice a day in the first year? Possibly, but then I would be concerned about her getting back in calf. That can be a real issue with our first calvers. So possibly twice a day, but Steve, you might better back up the research, but I would be thinking that once a day in the first lactation doesn't have any effect long term for that heifer.
But that'd be my understanding, and certainly I think there are some farmers here that I've come across where they'll just put heifers on once a day to take the pressure off in that first lactation. So it just allows them to grow. It really depends on how well grown they are, I guess, at the start of that first lactation. But it does take a lot of pressure off and allows them to grow better in that first year.
Yeah. So yeah,
I was just going to add to that, like in the work that we've done, like agreeing with the lads there, that the proportionate drop of the heifers is actually the same as the cows. So, you know, sometimes people think that heifers will drop more than the cows, but if production has dropped 20%, it's 20% in the cows and 20% in the heifers. So you're not disadvantaging your heifers by putting them on once a day.
Yeah, and I suppose then if you're leaving the heifers on twice a day, you know, you're asking to do the hard work between calving and AI. You know, you're risking getting them back in calf, and you know, they're still growing and all that. It's a pity for that small bit of extra milk that you're kind of sacrificing those other gains that could benefit you long term. I suppose, Brent, I'll show this at you. Do farms doing the 3 and 2? Do they keep staff longer than farms doing twice a day? Feels like they should, but
Yes. I guess it's really reduced the amount of 3 and 2 here in New Zealand in the last few years. We've moved away from 3 and 2 now in a lot of places. But what we're finding is that the staff are a lot happier, and staff happiness means staff longevity. The reason why I guess we're doing less 3 and 2 over here is because of the jumble of the weekends. So we're seeing more 10 and 7 and 11 and 7 and even 9 and 7. But when I see this reduced milking frequency, I get a lot of reports from around New Zealand and from overseas, and people are happier and the cows are happier. That's the important driver. Yes, so people do tend to stay longer.
Yeah. Mark, I suppose you have a couple of staff there on farm. How are they fighting it? Are they begging you to go back to twice a day, or?
No, we definitely wouldn't want to go back to twice a day. Really, we've tried this, you know, for the end of the season, and it's working that well. Everyone's happy. That I'm pretty convinced that we'll try all season next year. We'll go, from the word go. Beginning of February, we'll be 3 and 2. Well, we're 3 and 2 at the minute, so we're on a fortnightly pattern, but we'll probably end up on the 10 and 7, I would say.
Yeah.
I have a slide. I have a slide, Mark, on 11 and 7 that may be of interest at some stage. You may share it here. That may be of use to you guys.
Yeah. Here's a question. Whoever wants to answer this can take it. What's the yield reduction in a 500 kg solid cow on twice a day? So on twice a day, she's doing 500 mixed solids. What would you expect her to drop back to on 3 and 2? Because 500 mixed solids is a nice production. You don't really want to lose much of that. Well,
I'll chuck it. 10% if you did it all season for a cow like that.
Okay, so you're back to 450.
Yep, it could be. As long as there's no challenges, it could be 5 to 10%, but 10% would be the upper limit of loss I would expect.
Okay, so you're back to 450, but you're saving, what did you say, how many milkins are we saving again a year? We're saving 150 milkins, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's easy for me to say if I don't need those last 50 mixed solids. All right. Do anyone else want to contribute to that? Emer, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, no, we've just done the full time once a day, and the losses there, you're looking at it about 100 kilos. Like our twice a day cows would do just over the the 500 kilo cow or 500 kilos in lactation, and it's about 410 or that for full time once a day. For late lactation, for going the last 7 weeks, once a day at the end of lactation, no difference in milk or milk solids, so it's well worth doing. And also 4 weeks, once a day at the start of lactation, no effect on solids, so definitely a runner.
Emer, have you done any financial modelling on that? What you're back a bit. Is there much savings financially there?
No, we haven't done any finance yet. We've spoken to Lawrence and we're about to do it. But like, given that we have no there's no difference, especially at 4 weeks, there's no early lactation, no difference in production between the two. I don't expect there to be much difference. Like, yes, you will be saving a little bit on electricity. We found that like cups on time is reduced by about 30%. So you also have to add in like the extra time of, going getting the cows, putting them back, washing down yards, that kind of thing. All needs to be included, so the time saving will be greater.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I remember when I was working agri banking back in New Zealand a few years ago, and we'd have some guys on once a day, and the money they're putting away, it's just a cost control. I see you probably see that too, do you? That they're not really, they're probably more profitable nearly a once a day for some reason.
Yeah, we're waiting to get more data on it. Profit is a key driver. Just really happy to hear that, Amir, about the 4 weeks at the start of lactation and the 7 to 8 weeks at the end of lactation. No real difference. That's huge, because that's what we see here too when we change to once a day. So that's I noticed some of the questions are asking that, and I think it's very important to reiterate that. If we do it at the start and the end once a day, we don't see much change in the total season's lactation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so we have done them separately. So we've looked at just early lactation, just the end of lactation. This, like the experiment that's ongoing at the moment, is 4 weeks at the start and 7 weeks at the end of lactation. So putting them together. But I think the key thing to remember is, especially like, say, it's the same, I guess, in New Zealand, but in an Irish context, that if you're going once a day milking at the start of lactation, like say, for example, you do it for the first month, so we'll say February, the cows that calve early, they're going to be on it for 4 weeks. But then, like, as the month progresses, you get cows that are calving towards the end of February, they're only on it for a few days. So in actual fact, the loss that you're getting over the whole period is very, very little.
Mark, question here from Paul Richards. I don't think you're doing autumn block calving, I'm not sure, but the question is, do you think 10 and 7 would work in autumn block calving in the UK?
Probably a slightly different type of cow to what we've got. We've been crossbreeding for 11 years. With the autumn calving cows, probably more of a Friesian cow, slightly higher yielding. I wouldn't say it wouldn't work, but he could give it a go.
Yeah, approach it with caution, I suppose, because you're going to be indoors too, eh? So,
yeah, maybe give it a go, but I wouldn't say it wouldn't work. But maybe on a lower yielding cow, more of a Jersey type like we've got, it's maybe would work slightly better.
Conception rates going from twice a day to 3 or 2, 3 and 2 at the start of mating. What would you have seen there, Bicey? The other guys haven't got there yet. So what would you see, Bicey? How much would they go up, or do they go up?
A lot of my guys will actually use once a day at the start of mating for in and estrus cows, but the guys who are doing 3 and 2 or 10 and 7 either all season from the start of AI are seeing a significant improvement in reproduction. So that's huge. It really takes the pressure off the cows, and I think it's just the fact that they're walking less energy is used. Their milk production is slightly less as well, which has some bearing on it, I believe. But yeah, we see significant improvements. Getting 3 weeks. They're sitting there at submission rates of 90 to 95%. It's insane. So it's pretty cool. So it is a huge improvement.
Yeah, and it must be like when you come into breeding, it's a busy time of the year. You're doing silage. you're still feeding calves, you're still busy. It's nice when you get high, when things are going your way and you're getting high submission rates and you think you're going to be in for a belt of a 6-week calving rate. It's easier to keep things going mentally.
John, with that, just a rider for you. Often we're sitting here at AI in the middle of AI, and we can't do that 10 a.m. milking because the AI tech won't come. So often we're sitting on 3 and 2 or 10 and 7. Everyone milks at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning every day, and they just milk at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, just over AI, so they can keep the AI tech coming at the same time every day. Otherwise, sometimes it's not practical to hook up with the AI companies.
Okay, so they'll go what, twice a day then for that period of?
No, just 5 a.m. every day, and they keep their milkings at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, say Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But they keep the morning milkings. They don't do it 10 a.m. They keep them at 5 a.m. just so they can get the AI tech there every day.
And would there be much of a difference going 5 a.m. every morning as opposed to every second morning and then doing whatever 11 a.m. every second day?
Yeah, we think there's a small loss, but it's statistically. You talk to Paul Edwards at Dairy NZ, and statistically they can't really pick it up. There is a small loss, but it's not huge. We have a number of farmers who don't like doing that 10 or 11 a.m. milking. They just always 6 a.m. the whole time, and they have 3 or 4 afternoon milkings per week. And that's another way of doing 3 and 2 or 10 and 7. You can adjust things to make it work.
Yeah, that sounds actually very appealing to me because you're milking at 6 in the morning, you're done at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and the day is yours. I know you have other jobs to do, but yeah, the day is yours in a way.
We have those guys who do it like that, and it works well for them.
Emer, I'm going to throw this question your way. So, currently doing 1.4 milk solids over 13 litres twice a day, 5 weeks from drying off. What sort of production loss would you expect from switching to once a day for the rest of the season?
So last year when we did the experiment, we went 7 weeks before dry off and 11 weeks before dry off. Like up to the 7 weeks, there was no difference. The solids and the milk yield were the exact same. Because I guess, your volume is so small at the end of lactation, so it's diluting it out across the whole thing. Like you are going to have that production 20-25% loss. The key thing to remember though is that with going once a day at the end of lactation, that cell count can be an issue. So you kind of want your cell count to be below 100. Because what we found is when we put the cows on once a day, the cell count spiked. It did go back down again, but not back to the level of the twice a day. You can go through the herd and pick out any high cell count cows and dry those off before you go once a day, but it's just something to bear in mind before you do switch over. But like 5 weeks out, the losses are going to be absolutely minimal.
Okay, thanks for that, Emer. To the farmers, Martin, you can go first. Have you noticed, I'm probably a bit soon, but have you noticed any cost savings? And if so, percentage-wise, what is that? So would you have noticed any savings so far in your business? It's probably a bit soon to do analysis, is it?
Yeah. I suppose the only obvious one so far is just to reduce milkings and having to get relief milkers in for those, or milkers for those milkings. But I suppose one of the things I've noticed recently is the cows are in very good condition. So coming up to dry off, there's not going to be any issues with body conditions or score or anything like that. There's no thin cows to be worried about or anything like that. So I suppose that'll have a benefit for the start of next year. So that might be a bit of a saving. Other than that, it's probably too early to say.
Yeah. And Mark, same for you, probably, is it?
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, too early to tell, really, but much the same as Martin. Labour, yeah, I can see the labour saving straight away, really, on hours worked. And yeah, just a percentage of your reduction on electric and chemicals.
Okay. Emer, I'll direct this one to you. If you're once a day for 4 weeks at the start of lactation, will empty rates be lower because of a lower peak milk?
To be honest, in all the experiments that we've done, the fertility has actually been exceptional across all the herds, even the twice a day herds. But in theory, yes, like, you know, if their milk output is reduced, you know, the lower energy demand for that, they should be building body reserves, and yet they should have better fertility. And like we saw good fertility, like, I suppose, fortunately, but yet unfortunately, the twice a days that we worked with were also very fertile, so we didn't see much difference between the two.
Bicey, do you want to, is that would be similar to what you've seen?
You can repeat that?
Yeah, so the question is, if you're once a day for 4 weeks at the start of lactation, will empty rates be lower because of a lower peak milk?
Possibly. I don't have any data for that, but I would suspect that they would be lower if you've taken the pressure off the cows, particularly if there was an environmental challenge at that time.
Okay, fair enough. So this question here, this is for you, Bicey. If 3 and 2 system was adopted as a herd approach, peak lactation, so for the whole herd, a peak lactation used 3 and 2, what would be the reduction in litres? And would a substantial recovery be possible to twice a day for mid-lactation? This is our herd doing about 7,000 litres, 550 milk solids.
Yeah, they'd probably come down. I would expect their peak milk would come down 5 to 10% in solids. I don't know what it converts to in litres for you guys. When they recovered again, they would probably go back very similar to where they were on twice a day, perhaps down a little bit. You would have a slight dip. If you're trying to reduce litres over peak, you'd probably be better off to go to once a day and get higher solids in your milk production, in your milk. And that might be the best way if you're trying to reduce peak milk production. 3 and 2 mightn't reduce that peak milk enough for you trying to get under a quota level. But 3 and 2 will drop to 5 to 10%. I think on once a day, it'll be significantly higher. If you put them back on twice a day, yes, they will lift again. Mainly it's just due to milking frequency. They may not go quite back to where they were twice a day, but I'm just looking at a lactation curve right now where they were on once a day this season compared to twice a day. They've now gone to 9 and 7, and they're about to meet last season's twice a day levels. So the cows are very flexible. They will bounce back if you increase milking frequency, and they will drop if you reduce milking frequency.
Yeah. What percentage? I suppose 2 farmers haven't got there yet. The 6 week in calf rate, 3 and 2 versus twice a day. What difference is there? It's too hard to say. I suppose Emer, you said there's not much of a difference anyway between the once a day and twice a day in more parts.
That was just in our herd, like the EBI of the herd were 165 to 170 that year, and about 65 to 70 euro of that was coming from fertility. So, you know, they were pretty fertile.
Bicey, what's your thoughts going 6 week in calf rate? How much would it improve going from a twice a day system to 3 and 2?
Okay, our average empty rate, I think in New Zealand is around 15%. I would expect 10%. And if it was once a day, I'd expect 7%. What we're seeing practically amongst a lot of farmers, they will drop it down probably a third if they go 3 and 2, and half if they went once a day, depending on the cows. The big Holstein type animals, yeah, I've seen empty rates drop from 26 to 13%. For Jerseys, I've seen them drop from say 12 to 15% down to even 5% on once a day, and halfway between that for 3 and 2. That would be my expectations.
Okay, so it's, all right. So if you're say 15% in calf rate, you're back down to say 10, 12, yeah, 10, yep. And then you're looking at about 7 for once a day.
Yeah, halve it. Yep, halve it for once a day. All other things considered.
Yeah. What are the reasons? I suppose I'll put this to Mark and Martin. Now, what would be the reasons for you to go back to, because you're so early in the game? What would be the reasons to go back to twice a day milking? What would make you go back? I suppose a roundabout way of what don't you like about the 3 and 2?
Yeah, there's nothing I don't like really about the 3 and 2. It's I was worried about production loss to start with, you know, when we first got onto it. But I'm so happy what we're doing and how it's going, that, you know, I think we'll go, like I said, we'll go all season next year on 3 and 2 and see how it goes. And of course, if it's not working out, we can switch back straight away to twice a day. But yeah, there's nothing really. It's just getting your pasture allocations correct in the feeding. We're on our second day. We milk at 9:30 in the morning. I might bring that forward to 9 or 8:30, just because it does get towards lunchtime by the time you've finished up and got the cows shut away. So we might just bring that. We might just play about with the times a bit more.
Okay, and Martin, what would have to happen for you to go back to twice a day?
I suppose we're early at it as well. We're going to do the same. We're going to try 3 and 2 for the full year next year, and once they actually do the farm. But I suppose if there's issues with cell count, not that we've had any so far, but either issues with cell count or production maybe might make us go back. But at the minute, there's so much flexibility in what times we can try, and different ways we can try the 3 and 2 or 10 and 7, etc. That we should be able to find a solution that we don't lose production, or that it works for us. So at the minute, I don't see any reason.
Yeah, the key piece here is flexibility in it. Steve, I'll just bring you back into it so you don't feel too bad that you're being left out of it. Question here is, I've read in some Teagasc research that all cows should have 60 days dry, and first lactation heifers should have 90 for others to fully repair. I've always been very strict on this to ensure peak milk in the following lactation isn't compromised by producing a few extra litres in the back end of the current lactation. Would you agree with these dry period lengths, or do you think they're too long?
You brought it back in on a question I can't answer. It's like I said before, it's the only data I'm familiar with is the American data. It says 42 days dry is about right. So, I've certainly never seen anything. I don't think that heifers require a longer period for full regrowth of the gland, but there could be data out there I've not seen. So sorry, I can't. I don't know.
Eva, do you want to comment if it's came out Teagasc? I'm sure you've read it and examined it already.
Yeah, and that'd be standard practice across our farms. Like, again, the only other research that I've kind of read in it is like a dry period less than 3 or 4 weeks will start affecting your colostrum quality. You know, so that will have knock-on consequences for the calves. So you just need to be careful there. But like personally, I think it's important, particularly for the heifers, to give them a sufficient dry period, because they do grow a lot over that first winter.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm sorry, sharp there is keep doing what you're doing. It's working well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I'll throw this one to you. Do these farmers change their calf feeding regimes too? So I suppose this is about fresh milk being available in the morning to feed the calves, or say on the second day, how do guys feed their calves?
Yeah, they actually usually either have milk powder or they have to heat it.
Okay, fair enough.
For that second day.
All right. So Brent, do you see potential to suppress volume in the spring peak but maintain fat and protein percentage to reduce processing penalties, which would be similar to what Fonterra do?
Yeah, we don't get penalised quite so much as hard as that. As talk a while ago about this, but definitely if you've got a issue with peak processing capacity, go to once a day. If you need to, say for us it's October, November, December. It'd be March, April, May for you guys.
Yeah, April, May, June. Yeah,
April, May, June. So for April, May, June, if you went once a day, you will be able to suppress litres significantly, and I guess you're penalised on litres.
Yes.
Oh, you're penalised on volume. Okay, so you need to suppress your litres. Once a day will do that straight away, but it will probably reduce your litres by, say, 20% MR. I think that would be right for you guys.
Yeah.
But your solids might only be dropped by 10%. I don't know your cows at all, but that would be my expectation through that peak. And then if you get to, say, end of June, and you put the cows back on twice a day, I would expect them to come up again with greater milking frequency. We could go to 3 and 2. But my thought would be, if all of a sudden on the 1st of July you started getting back into the good payments again, I'd put the cows on twice a day for at least a couple of weeks to get that udder memory coming back again, get that rescue back again, and then you could perhaps change to 3 and 2 or 10 and 7, etc. And we do that quite a bit when we've had mobs of sick cows or cows that have been affected with things, or we've had sheds that cut down. You actually get them restart again on twice a day to get them rebuilt very quickly, then change to what milking frequency you want after that. But definitely once a day to suppress that peak for April, May, June.
Yeah, basically we spoke about this before, and we kind of came to the conclusion, hey, like if you had 100 cows, you're at nothing just doing 20 or 50 cows. You really need to put them all on once a day to get a proper volume reduction.
Yep.
That's what we kind of, so it's just, yeah, just make sure you do your sums. There's no use putting a few of them on once a day, creating a lot of hardship, and you're not getting in under that quota limit. Okay. Mark, what's 3 and 2 times are you milking?
What times are we milking, did you say?
Yeah.
So we're milking 5 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and 9:30 the following day. I did have a friend ask me why we don't milk a bit later than the 3 p.m. to equal out the milkings, equal out the times in between a little bit more. But when we changed this, I was pretty keen that we didn't work late. No, nobody works late, because I've tried proper 16 hourly before, and like we've seen in Brent's presentation, it's unsociable. It's unsociable. I didn't want a night milking, so we're 10, 18 and a half and 19 and a half hours between milkings.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Enough. Yeah, fair play to you for doing that for the staff. Now a question came in here. So with that reduced workload, does that lead to reduced wages? Or maybe you have to be paying by the hour. I'm not sure how you pay.
Yeah, some will be salary, some hourly rate, but no, I definitely wouldn't be looking to reduce wages at all. We want to retain staff, so we want to look after them. There's no reason to reduce the wage at all.
Okay. Mark, how does 3 and 2 affect milk volumes picked up by your milk buyer? Any savings in collection costs? And is that trouble with the timing of the milk lorry picking it up?
No, we're very lucky. We're on night collection anyway, very late at night, so there's no trouble there with collection, and no volume bonuses. I mean, like I said, October this year compared to last October, the leases are very, very similar. So nothing's changed.
Okay, and Martin, what's your thing there on pick-up times? Is that a bit of a juggle?
No, we're fairly okay as well. We're collecting late in the evening, so it's working out okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, Emer, I'll throw this your direction. Anytime you try to go once a day in late lactation, somatic cell count goes through the roof. Is this normal?
Yeah. It is, and like I was saying there previously, that's what we found ourselves, that once you go once a day, it does spike, comes back down a little bit, but not back to the twice a day levels. So you kind of need to be under the 100, a cell count of 100 to go once a day. And if you're above that, can you find the cows that are high and even dry those off first to get you under that level.
So if I get caught this year, say with a high somatic cell count, I'm saying, right, that's it, never again. What am I going to do in the next 12 months? I come into next September and I've got all my ducks in a row. What's that look like to make sure that somatic cell count's not going to be an issue? Is it just identifying those high systematic cell count cows and pulling them out?
I think so. Like, say we would have started off with a relatively low cell count, and then when we did transfer them over, some of them, like in particular, like a couple of heifers, whose yields were low, and then when they dropped even lower, that dilution effect, that they, like, we just had to dry them off after a week or two on the once a day. And I think you just need to be proactive in it.
Yeah, same basically, you the same
Yeah,
recommendation.
John. Yeah. So that what you're seeing there, Mar, is what we've probably seen about 15, 20 years ago. Now more of the New Zealand herd is used to changing in milking frequency. A lot of the culling and selection pressure is being done. And these herds, as you go through your first or second year of doing once a day or 3 and 2, your herd selection pressure for somatic cell count will improve greatly, and the cows will become more adapted to it.
Okay. Yeah. So say reduced milking frequencies, does it fare better economically during high milk price times or low? I see. I'm going to just throw that one at you. So I suppose if you're a high input, the argument is high input system will make better money during high milk price, and during low milk price then it will suffer a little bit harder. So what does reduced milking frequencies, how does that fit into that high milk price and low milk price?
It depends on how what sort of milking frequency you do. I hear a lot of people who are going to do 3 and 2 all season, or 10 and 7 all season. My best guess is actually do many frequencies all season. If you start on once a day for 3 or 4 weeks, Mark, you were talking about going 3 and 2 all year. Well, you could go once a day for the first 3 weeks, take the workload off, and there's no loss in production for the rest of the lactation. That's an important thing to think about. If you go 3 and 2 for 2 or 3 months, you could go twice a day. If the payout's really high, you obviously want to chase it. But you just got to be careful you don't end up next year with a very low payout and have a high empty rate. So you've got to be careful. So if you've got a system that works and you're making a profit, do it. Just be aware of chasing rainbows.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, you just mentioned earlier about the 6 and 7 days. So making 6 times in 7 days. Any early insights? Anything? Is it too soon?
Yeah, too soon. We had one guy do it. Yeah, he did 1 day, and that was it. It's just an experiment. It really has stirred a lot of people up. One thing I will say, Emma, about what's happening there with once a day, 9 and 7. So we have a chap who is milking 5 o'clock in the morning all year. He's been on once a day all season, and he's put 2 3 p.m. milkings back in. So his herd has lifted 0.21 milk solids on average for the week. So they've gone from it was a very, very tough farm. They only do 1.55 on once a day. They've lifted to 1.76 average for the week, just having 2 extra milkings. So that's one thing to think about if you're a once a day farmer. We need to have more information on this, but yeah, they've lifted 0.21 milk solids per day, per week, per cow, just with 2 milkings.
Are they coming in like on a say a couple of days apart, so on a Tuesday and a Thursday, or Monday and a Thursday? Or
he's 5 a.m. all week, and he goes in on a Monday and Thursday at 3 p.m.
Yeah,
and his milk production curve looks like an earthquake, the tremors of the earthquake. But yeah, significant change in production. We couldn't believe how much it's changed with those 2 extra milkings. Thank you, Steve, for that, from 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, 9 milkings in 7 days will also work. So, Emma, with some of your stuff there, it's going to be interesting to look at that. Can we actually make once a day milking even more profitable with 2 afternoon milkings? It's a question for scientists like yourself.
yeah.
It's an interesting question. Yeah.
I can send you the data.
Yeah. No. Do.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting, yeah, because one of the benefits of once a day is you're off in the afternoon, but most people can give up 2 afternoons. Like they might want their Wednesday off to go to a kids thing or something, but they have no problem doing a Monday or a Thursday or Monday and a Friday or work it out.
Yeah,
so it's interesting. Like,
yeah, it's very, very, very interesting production curve. I just got it up on my screen at the moment, and it's wild, but it works.
Yeah. So here's, would 3 and 2 after breeding affect pregnancy rates and milk production the remainder of the year? I'll throw that to you, Bicey. You're probably the most experienced in that.
Yeah. Okay. With 3 and 2, what would be the average loss? I've always worked on a loss of 1% of pregnancies from the end of mating. So say your AI for the, you finished AI at the end of 5 months of lactation, you've got 5 months to the end, so you could end up with 5% more losses. I would expect, with the less stress on the animals, that the losses are less. We haven't got a lot of data on pregnancy losses. I'm hoping someone at some stage will actually do regular pregnancy tests through the milk in New Zealand on a weekly basis, just to see what losses there are after the end of mating. But all we know is that fertility is greatly improved, like the in-calf rate is greatly improved on the lower milking frequencies compared to twice a day. That's all I could comment with that.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, I might just, because I'll put this one towards you, Martin. I know you have a couple of different breeds and whatnot in your herd. Does Jerseys handle once a day better than the crossbreds, Friesians, and Holsteins?
I don't know really, to be honest. We have pure Jerseys there that are milking very well on the once a day. But whether they're milking any better than or whether they've adapted any better than the crossbreds, it's kind of hard to know. But definitely the crossbreds and probably the Jerseys have definitely taken to it a lot better than the Friesians that are in the herd. So it doesn't really answer your question, but
yeah, no, that's fair enough. Bicey, you had you shared with me before, I think, with a herd. They're using American genetics, big cows, big litres. I think you were saying maybe 35 litres a day in peak, and they go once a day or 3 and 2.
They went once a day. So I have 3 herds that got American Holstein genetics that are on once a day. One's been going for 14 seasons now. But they weren't high producing feeders, if you know what I mean. They're just pasture based, and they would do about 390 a cow on twice a day. They now do that on once a day. I have got a high input herd, American Holsteins, and they would do 520 on twice a day. We can only get 440 on once a day. So there is a loss with those high input herds and high the American Holstein type animals. So we can't get that twice a day production on once a day, that's for sure. But if I've got cows who are doing 420, 430, I can get close to 400 on once a day. It just depends on the feeding and the ability of the people. It's often the genetics of the farmer that are just as important.
Genetics of the farmer, just as important as genetics of the cows. Yeah, I like that. That's very good. And let me see, get the next one here. I suppose, is there any chance for cows not adapting to the change in milking frequency and having mastitis problems and having to be culled? I suppose that's a real barrier to a lot of people's mindsets to changing their mindset to go to a different milking frequency than twice a day. All my cows are going to get mastitis and going to all have to be culled. So I suppose, Mark, I'll go to you first. Was that the scenario with you? Had you many cows that didn't transition well?
Well, it was a worry. As well as a potential drop in yield, it was. I was a bit worried on what might happen, but interestingly, nothing happened. Our cell count was about 160, and it's still about 160. It stayed the same, so we've had no change. And I might jinx it, but we've only had 1 case of mastitis in the last 9 weeks.
Yeah, Martin, what was your experience in that?
Going to 3 and 2, all the cows that went on the 3 and 2 have stayed on it. None of them had any issues with drops in the yield or anything, and the same as Mark, our cell count is stayed the same as what it was before the switch, so no issues from that side of things.
Yeah. So basically, what's your experience there? You've talked a lot of lads into 3 and 2, and you're probably now just have to say to the farmer, talk to the neighbour, and he'll convince you. But what did you have to do at the start to get guys onto 3 and 2, where you saw it as a potential way of improving that farm situation?
Oh, there was a lot of alcohol involved. Basically, it was just the first go we went on because of the weather, and it's just come to the fact, mainly in New Zealand, it's caught on because you get to Christmas time and there's no advantage of milking twice a day, because they'll do the same production on 3 and 2 after 5 months of lactation. That was the first thing. And once you got people their heads around that, they said, why am I milking twice a day then? And people sort of understood that there was the economics of less work. Then we started to tidy up the hours a bit and bring the hours in and a bit in the evening and making it a bit more sociable as we got a bit more flexible. A lot of people are going 3 and 2 all season, or 10 and 7 all season, or 11 and 7 all season, basically just for the people. Myself, I like all milking frequencies, but I think to convince the people to do it, it's just taking the pressure off the people. If I was going to try and get someone to do it, John, I would actually say, okay, after 5 months of lactation, we're pretty sure, very confident I'm in my 3rd decade of doing this, that after 5 months of lactation, there is very little production loss compared to twice a day. And as long as you're tidy with a somatic cell count, and you've got no issues there, and you can feed them and think through it carefully, why wouldn't you do 3 and 2 or a version thereof? With permission, John, could I show you a table?
Yeah, go for it there.
Of some thinking, guys, and particularly you guys are on 3 and 2 at the moment. Would that be all right to share screen for a second?
Yeah, go for it. Just make sure you open the right page. We're live here now.
Yeah, oops, yes. Oops, oh, good Lord. Okay, you see that there? You got that there?
No, it's just saying started sharing. There we are. Okay. Yeah.
You got it now?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so for Mark and Martin, you've got your 3 and 2 here, maybe 5 a.m., 3 to 7 p.m., etc. And that sort of stuff you're doing on 3 and 2. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
What I'd like you to do is just come next door and look at 11 and 7, particularly if you're struggling with, it's that fortnight thing where the weekends are all asked about face, to be fair. A lot of my guys now are doing 11 and 7 if they can't handle 10 and 7, because some people can't handle 10 and 7, that double up of milkings. So what you could do, and we front load Monday and Tuesday, twice a day, then go Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So that's an option for you. I'll email that to John and he can send that out if you like. Over here next door is the chap I'm talking about in Golden Bay. He's on once a day, but he's chucked in 2 afternoon milkings. And he's the chap who's jumped 0.21 milk solids a cow for the whole week. By the way, those days that he's actually milking on twice a day, the cows jumped to 2.33 solids a day. It's really weird. And of course, over here next door is 10 and 7, which are traditional 10 and 7. So I just thought I'd share that for you guys to have a look at. But this one here is an alternative to 3 and 2. If you have staph issues or you've got a somatic cell count issue and you think to yourself, I'd really like to have stable weeks, Wednesday, Friday, and Sundays once a day. So that's options for you. Note that these times could all be 5 a.m. if you wished, whatever you like. But I'll stop share now, but I'll send it through to you, John, and you can send that out if you wish.
Yeah, I'll do that. We're recording the webinar, so I'll when I'm sending that out to everyone, they'll get that as a part of it. Okay. Any issues with cows being once a day and a reduction in lactose percentage? I'll send that one to you, Emer.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. So we've been working with the food centre last year, and we're doing it again this year, where we're collecting the once a day milk. And what we found is that there's no difference. In fact, once a day milk has improved the cheese. I'll just get up here to improve the cheese making functionality, and potentially has improved milk heat stability. And in terms of lactose, there's no apparent relationship between low lactose content and the bulk milk possibility. Yes, the lactose did go like it did go low, it did drop low in the once a day cows, but when the like in the food centre they've actually used it to make cheese and do that, like the low lactose isn't an issue. But I know that's not going to, like, you know, you're still penalised if you have your low lactose, but it's something that maybe needs to be worked on over time, that the low lactose isn't actually causing an issue with the possibility.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for answering that. Do you want to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, like I said, what we've seen here, certainly in the research I was doing a long time ago, was that you get a small reduction in lactose, and that the lactose that you're losing unfortunately gets peed out of the cow in its urine. So it's just not getting through into the milk, or is leaking back from the milk into the bloodstream. But there's but then the plus side, you've got an extra bit of protein and fat as well, which compensates a little bit for the volume loss. So it's but yeah, as Emma said, it's the processability is really hardly changed. I think talking to or listening to what Brett was saying about going to say milking 6 times a week rather than minimum 7 times a week, then I think to go that step further might well affect processing quality of milk, but that remains to be seen.
Just while I have you, Steve, and you just mentioned that, it's a nice segue into the next question. So what do you think of milking twice a day on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, once on a Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, and not milking at all on a Sunday? So it's basically 9 and 7, but you're having a better weekends. What are your thoughts on that? So you're once a day on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, twice a day on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and no milkings at all on Sunday. So Steve, will that work?
It might be for me. It might be a step too far. I think I'm not milking at all on Sunday, but as Brent says, you can just try it and see what happens. But you're really asking for a milking interval of, I would guess, at least 40 hours from Saturday to Monday morning. So
yeah, especially if you're once a day on a
they'll
Saturday.
recover. They'll recover, but there's you're putting, you're asking.
Yeah. But you see, what's your thoughts there? Like, it feels to me that if you're going to go and not milk on a Sunday, you should might as well be milking twice on the Saturday to bridge that gap. Or milking once on the Saturday is just a bridge too far. What's your thoughts?
Sorry, I was locked out there from. I didn't have it. So what was the question?
I'll read it back to you. So it's this farmer wants to milk twice a day on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, once a day on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, and no milking at all on the Sunday.
I'd be really interested to have a webinar on that.
let him do it with these cows, and then we can talk about it.
Okay. So I've looked at that. He'd want to milk them late on a Saturday night, so 6 o'clock on a Saturday night and 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning. That'll be 36 hours, and that would push it out reasonably far. The concern I would have would be somatic cell count issues. So I've had a couple of guys have a go at this, but there'd be issues with somatic cell count, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, no, please, can he do that? And I'd really like to know what happened. He would do us a big favour. Amar, you could write a paper on it, I'm sure. We could have some information, it'd be great.
So whoever he or she is, just send me a private message there.
Thank you for that. On behalf of the dairy.
You just signed yourself up to a year's monitoring there. Next question. I'll direct this to you, Emer, as you have more experience of housing than, say, the two boys in New Zealand. Could reduced milking frequency work in a house or partial house situation at the shoulders of the grazing season? Will milk leakage on cubicles be a potential problem?
I think hygiene is going to play a massive factor, like particularly in early lactation. We did find increased milk leakage, like the udders are firmer, and there's more milk leakage when you're milking them once a day. like, you know, I guess if you just think back to the past few springs that we've had, like the weather has been crap, so we've had pretty substantial periods of having to on-off graze the cows, or you know, put them in for a few nights. So we have done some work. It didn't necessarily elevate the cell count, but again, you know, hygiene practices were like, the shed was kept really clean. Milking practices, you know, the cows come in, they're pre-dipped, they're dry wiped, they're milk, there's backflush system in the clusters, and they're dipped again before they go. So, you know, really good milking routine, and good hygiene levels in the shed, and it should be fine.
Thanks very much for that, Emer. 2 questions left. 41 questions done already, so it's a fair play to you guys. It's a good slog you put in this evening. So, second last question. With herds changing from, say, to 3 and 2 or 10 and 7, they say most once-a-day farms take 3 years to get back to twice-a-day production. How long does it take to reach back to that twice-a-day production when you change back from 3 and 2? So the question really is, if you're on 3 and 2 for a couple of years and you switch back to twice a day, how long will it take you to get that twice-a-day production?
The first milking.
First milking, just like that. And would you agree then, Bicey, with the first comment that it will take 3 years to get your once-a-day production back?
Haven't had a lot of guys come back from once a day. When they've gone, they've usually gone. I would say no, I don't think there's any lag at all. The cows come back pretty quickly, particularly if it's a new lactation. I think they recover pretty well. The guys who've gone back, I know just a couple of farmers who've gone back to twice a day, and they've just gone back to what they always did.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure. Yeah, I don't think I've heard anything. Some of you, John, Steve, you might know something, but I've never heard any problems with it once you go back.
No, I haven't really spent much time on this one, but I've heard the same. It takes 3 years to go back, and I would have thought that's really just, you get the odd cow that doesn't like, which is probably the ones with the poor letdown.
I think that research. Sorry, I was just saying, I think that research is that if you go once a day, after 3 years, you get back to your production level that you would have been on. Like if you were milking twice a day before you started. I think that's maybe where the 3 years is coming from. To be honest, in our work, that's coming from New Zealand, and I think Paul Edwards has shown that in his data from the national herd. We're not seeing that with ours.
Brent, would you have seen that? Then say, well, how long would it take to get back to your twice a day production in 3 and 2?
Oh, for 3 and 2.
The end of the following year.
Lactation, if it's whole lactation, it's probably going to be your second season before you start to notice it. Definitely by the third. I see once a day people, they'll take between 1 and never.
Yeah.
Some people will never do the same as they did on twice a day. The lower producing herds, the harder farms, they will reach it quicker. They'll get closer to their twice a day production faster than the really high producing easy farms.
Yeah. I agree on that, because I see when I was in New Zealand for a couple of years, living up in Northland, as you know, Brent, Northland is hard country. Like, it's hard country, even in a good year, it's hard country. When they go once a day, like, nearly everyone comes back to that twice a day production after 5 years, regardless of the level of skill, and maybe 3 years if the skill is there and the culling options are there as well. So, but I can't see that happening in Ireland, that they'd come back. And why I would say that is because in, say, Northland, hard country, steep hills, gets dry, probably 6 weeks of a good grass quality really there from September to October, and then it gets dry for the summer, so you have the stocky grass. Where in Ireland, you have that good grass all year round, so your twice a day is going to be very good when the word go, and maybe they don't have that high twice a day production in the likes of Northland, or maybe even the West Coast, where it's a bit tougher as well in some parts. Yeah. Okay, Brent, do you find cows are standing around waiting to be milked on days when they're only being milked, say, once in 11 and 7? So I suppose it's, say, every second day when they're milked once a day, do you find that the cows are left? Are they hanging around the paddock waiting to come in?
It can take a week or two, but what you tend to find, the cows are creatures of habit, and if they know that's quite possibly they're not going to be milked within the next 3 or 4 hours, they'll stay out there and graze or go and sleep. When they know that their system's changed, they actually will only turn up if the motorbike goes past, so that they quickly adapt. And the thing we notice a lot when on 3 and 2 or 10 and 7, and particularly once a day, is the cows like to sleep and they're resting a lot more. And I believe a lot on twice a day, we actually don't let the cows sleep enough, particularly when there's a lot of time spent in the shed, and they need 8 hours sleep, and sometimes they just can't graze enough or sleep enough. And that's where the beauty of 3 and 2 and 10 and 7 and once a day really shows up. The spirit of the cows, the wellness of the cows, you can see them in the paddock. They look, and Mark and Martin, how do your cows look when you go out and get them? They must just look a lot better. They look better.
Yeah, cows are definitely in better condition anyway.
Are they kicking their feet up and just being sociable animals?
Yeah, they can be a bit giddy at times, all right. And
Giddy,
like you
no
said,
temperament issues, just giddy.
no. And as you said, they kind of get used to when you go from in the paddock, then they'll start to get up and move to go milking, but they get used to the routine very quick. They don't really stand at the gaps or anything like that after the first week.
And your experience, Mark?
Yeah, that's another reason maybe for moving the milking times from say 9:30 to 8:30. I do find sometimes they sort of look to want to come to the shed and they can't, and they'll be up at the back fence, let's say, and then they'll, because they're there for a few extra hours, they might sit down and then they come in quite mucky. It's just getting the allocation right. And what I have done as well is if we've got some wet days, wet mornings, sometimes I'll go up at say 6 o'clock, move the fence and give them another break just to keep them happy. It's just ways of getting around the job, really.
Yeah, awesome. Steve, I'll direct this at you, Steve. Could you reduce the dry days in a cow by reducing milking frequencies? Would it be an overall lactation production gain by milking longer? So I suppose less dry days, so you have more days in milk, but you're doing less milkings. Is there something to be gained from doing that?
I think Brent probably can answer better than I can on this, but I think the cows are going to be better conditioned at the end of lactation. You can milk a little bit longer on the back of that, and as long as you don't shorten up the dry period too much. Bearing in mind we're not really necessarily that certain exactly what the dry period should be, but if it's down to if you've got a 60-day dry period, say in New Zealand you'd be drying off in mid, sometimes perhaps late May, then they're calving in late July. There's plenty of time for the udder to grow for the next lactation. So yes, I think it does provide an opportunity to extend lactation.
Okay, fair enough. Emer, do you want to comment on that?
What we would have found is, particularly when you're full-time once a day, the cows tend to get very fat. So for ours, they would have been 70 kilos, heavier in half condition score, more than the twice-a-day cows by the end of lactation. And we've found that the once-a-day cow, like full-time once-a-day, tend to dry themselves off, that they've shorter lactation lengths compared to the twice-a-day cows. So the theory maybe, but in practice, I'm not sure you could follow through with it, particularly heifers. Even in our once-a-day herd now, we have a couple of heifers dry already. They've dried themselves off.
Okay, last question, guys. I suppose Steve or Emer, I'll throw this your direction, or maybe Bicey. What happens to drug with holes? Do you just have to use the statutory 7-day with holes? I suppose that's for dry cow turvy. Which probably I'll throw that to you, Emer, first.
Yeah, it's like just what we do. We actually increase the length. Like if it says 7 days, like a lot of the time we would have doubled it. Done it by milking. Like 7 days would have been 14 milkings in a once-a-day scenario. So we'll withhold them just in case.
Yeah. Steve or Brent, have you any experience in that?
Most of the guys will say if it's 4 days, it's 4 days, and do it like that, and they haven't had any problems. But I'm not saying that's what's going to be right on your farm. But majority of my guys have got down to a system they're quite comfortable. They don't have any issues with penicillin turning up in the milk. So, but that's on their farms. So I don't seem to have any problems with the majority of guys.
The same argument applies with colostrum, doesn't it, Boise? And how many milkings you need to do before you start putting it back for collection.
Yep.
Just as a disclaimer, we'll go with Toggles and Emer's advice on that one, just in case you failed the bulk tank test there and you have to sue somebody. Just go after Emer there,
or not.
So, hey guys, I really appreciate that. We had 45 questions there. We've been doing questions and answers there for an hour and 20, which is very unusual for a webinar, but we still have, I say somewhere about just shy of 70% of the people still here, like at 10 past 10, listening to us. So that shows that people listening have a real, really appreciate what you have to offer. So I thank you to all of you for doing that. I've enjoyed your contribution. I've enjoyed the fact that we have someone here from the UK, farmer from Ireland, researcher from Ireland, consultant from New Zealand, and a scientist from New Zealand. And it's just lots of international experience coming together, working together, trying to improve the farmers' lot. And I think more of that improves everybody's lot. I've also, like, a big learning for me is I always thought twice a day and once a day, where I suppose my time in New Zealand and more working with you guys over the last few months is we need to think about 3 and 2, 9 and 7, 10 and 7, 11 and 7, 3 and 2 this week, 10 and 7 next week, 3 and 2 the week after. Just work with what's in front of you. So no, that's been awesome. If you've any more questions, we must have answered them all. If you have any more questions about tonight's topic, just email them through to me or get in touch with your local LIC personnel, whether it's here or in Wales or in England or in Scotland, or if I think of a few guys coming in here from Australia and New Zealand as well. Get in with your local LIC personnel. We're in a lot of countries around the world, so we should be there. If you want to give us a question. For more information and the latest insight from LIC, check out our website, lic.ie, if you're living here in Ireland, uklic.co.uk if you're in the UK. Both countries run an edition of Grassroots. The latest edition is out this week, and it has a summary of tonight's presentations. So if you see that, you should get a digital copy. If you don't, flick us an email. We can send a digital copy or a printed version, hard copy if you want it. Our next webinar is 15th of December, and we will have Malcolm Ellis on that webinar. He's our New Zealand markets manager, I think he's proper title, and he will be discussing around the right live weight for the cow, whether it's a high input system, a graph-based system, indoor, all year round, what works well, or you might be on terms of milking frequency, whatever cow it is. So he's just going to go through that. But there'll be more information be sent out through the usual channels. From our guests, thank you. From the LIC team, thank you for listening. Good night or good day, depending where you are, and take care.